Welcome to today's Explainer. If you're someone who really loves decoding human behavior, looking at the mechanics of identity through a deeply structured lens, well, you are absolutely in the right place. Today, we're unpacking a truly fascinating astrological placement, the Sun in the 8th house. We're going to explore exactly how this placement shapes the intense dynamics of power, intimacy, and profound personal transformation. It's a complex, deep topic for sure, but we're going to break it all down step by step to really get at the psychology underneath the whole shebang.
Okay, let's dive into this. Control issues transform love into dominance battles. Man, that is a spicy, heavy-hitting statement, isn't it? When we analyze the specific symbolic interpretation, we're definitely not talking about lighthearted romances or those casual, breezy connections. No way! We're talking about a fundamental psychological wiring where the boundaries between affection and control completely blur together. It essentially sets the stage for an experience where intimacy isn't just about, sharing a life, it's about testing the absolute limits of trust and vulnerability.
To truly grasp what's going on here, we have to ground ourselves in what the 8th house actually represents in astrological traditions. This is the sector completely associated with deep, absolute transformation. It deals directly with psychological depth, the intense management of shared resources, and confronting massive issues of power. This isn't the house of daily routines or superficial water cooler chats. Literally, this is the house of the crucible. It's a thematic descent into the very deepest parts of the human psyche, where everything superficial just gets burned away and only the raw, unvarnished truth is left standing.
Which brings us to our first major act. Act 1, Love as a Battlefield, the interpersonal friction. Now, what's really interesting about this is how a crystal clear pattern emerges between specific triggers and the reactions they cause. Think about it. When vulnerability feels risky, the reaction isn't to just open up and let the chips fall where they may, right? Instead, the instinct is to attempt to manage and orchestrate the entire situation rather than actually experiencing it. When uncertainty creeps in, or that vital sense of security feels threatened, it frequently manifests as possessiveness, territorial behavior, and, you guessed it, jealousy. And when emotional tests happen, boom, they immediately escalate into power struggles over influence and who has the decision-making authority. It's a fascinating look at how the sheer difficulty of surrendering control systematically turns a partnership into a literal tactical battlefield.
And because of this intense dynamic, calm and predictable relationships, they often just feel totally uninteresting. They feel stagnant, kind of like a puzzle that's just way too easy to solve. But contrast that with connections that are deeply transformative and psychologically complex. That is the true magnet here. People with this placement are just irresistibly drawn to intense partners. They actively crave a connection that demands psychological rigor, even if it brings a pretty healthy dose of turbulence along with it, because, well, that turbulence proves there's something real and substantial actually at stake.
Moving deeper into the psyche, let's step into Act 2, the hidden power dynamics, the inner workings.
So the crucial point is this incredibly strong, almost overwhelming need to know absolutely everything. If someone has this placement, they very likely harbor a deep, deep aversion to hidden motives. They just feel compelled to uncover secrets and dig around for the bottom line. And why is that? Because information is a form of control, and surprises? Well, surprises are a form of vulnerability. But as you can probably imagine, constantly digging for hidden agendas creates a massive amount of internal tension. It builds this internal anxiety that demands constant vigilance, which makes it incredibly difficult to just sit back, relax, and take things at face value.
And yet, despite all that internal anxiety and the constant need for vigilance, look at how the world actually sees you. Others may perceive you as incredibly powerful. You're intensely private, notoriously difficult to influence, and you project an undeniable magnetism, even when you aren't trying to. It's such a fascinating paradox. That internal drive for control creates this outwardly intimidating, incredibly magnetic armor. People pick up on that depth and that absolute refusal to be easily swayed, which naturally commands respect and attention the second you walk into a room.
This brings us to a really unique behavioral pattern: hidden leadership tactics. First off, they avoid leading out in the open. Second, they focus intensely on strategic positioning. And third, they influence the final outcomes from entirely behind the scenes. From a psychological standpoint, this is absolutely brilliant. It perfectly satisfies that 8th house need to maintain control, but it entirely removes the vulnerability of being the person standing out on the front lines. They essentially get to orchestrate the whole outcome and steer the ship without ever exposing themselves to the direct line of fire.
Let's shift gears now and step right into Act 3, Material and Identity Crises, the Crucible.
When we look at recurring sources of financial conflict here, we see some very common flashpoints: shared resources, debts, inheritances, and joint finances. In the 8th house, material themes inevitably become intense battlegrounds. You see, money is rarely just money here. It's a direct proxy for power, for survival, and for independence. Negotiating joint finances becomes this incredibly intense negotiation of trust itself. These are the tangible, heavy-hitting realities where the deep fear of losing control violently collides with the practical, everyday necessity of actually sharing a life with someone.
And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate outcome of all these material and interpersonal clashes: the cycle of reinvention. First, the old ego gets challenged, which inevitably leads to a major life upheaval, a true, undeniable crisis point. This friction then forces a complete, ground-up reinvention of their entire sense of self. And finally, from those ashes, a newly resilient personal authority is forged. You see, major life upheavals aren't just random bad luck for this placement. They are the exact evolutionary mechanisms required to repeatedly strip away the superficial fluff and forge a much more profound, authentic kind of power.
Now let's just take a breath for a second. Is it always just a battle for control? Are people with this placement really doomed to an endless, exhausting cycle of power struggles, financial standoffs, and intense psychological warfare?
The answer, thankfully, is a resounding no. Which brings us to our final and frankly most beautiful act. Act 4, Transformation Through Trust, the Rebirth.
Let's move to and see how this builds into the ultimate evolutionary lesson. First, it's about learning that trust actually creates strength, not weakness. Then, it's about consciously stopping the attempt to win every single control battle. And finally, it's discovering that genuine, earth-shattering intimacy can only really come through shared power. Over time, that relentless, anxious grip starts to soften. The realization finally hits that true security isn't about perfectly managing every little detail. It's about building a bond that is strong enough to catch you when you finally choose to let go.
When this is truly mastered, the result is just astonishing. At its best, this placement produces a profound, almost X-ray level of self-awareness. And there is a beautiful, redeeming irony to all of this. By enduring those deep internal struggles, by literally surviving the fires of transformation and reinvention, individuals with this placement develop an unparalleled ability to guide other people through their own major life changes. They essentially become a lighthouse in the storm, simply because they are so intimately familiar with what the dark looks like, and they know exactly how to navigate it.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. True intimacy comes from shared power. What if surrendering control is actually the ultimate power move? What if letting go and fully embracing vulnerability is the one thing that gives you exactly what you've been fighting for all along? I really hope this structured dive has sparked some meaningful reflection for you. Keep learning, keep seeking that clarity, and we'll catch you in the next one.